Nearly 1 year after Far Cry 6 was officially revealed, we've finally gotten a deeper look at the game, including a story trailer introducing the main protagonist, Dani Rojas, another trailer unveiling some of the tools of the Guerilla Revolution, and some selected gameplay. Perhaps most importantly, we got an official release date. Far Cry 6 will be available on October 7th later this year. There's a ton of new information to analyze, and in this video, I'll be breaking down the things I'm concerned about and the things I'm excited for. There's a lot more positive than negative here, so I'm going to start with my concerns so that we can end on a good note. I'll be discussing my concerns from what I consider to be the most important to the least important. Accordingly, my single biggest concern for this game is the consistency of its tone. A desperate guerrilla rebellion against a brutal dictatorship in a country that's dying is an extremely dark, serious topic. It shouldn't be taken lightly. However, the developers seem insistent on doing their best to undermine the moral gravity of the situation every chance they get, such as the introduction of the Discos Locos disc launcher, which plays the Macarena while you aren't firing it at enemies. Worse still, the player will be able to equip Supremo backpacks, which are essentially superpowers that turn you into a one-man army. It appears that these work like an ultimate ability, which would be great if we were talking about Apex Legends, but this is a Far Cry game, trying to get us emotionally invested in toppling a dictator. That's hard to do when we can run around and play superheroes across the map. I'm not asking for Far Cry 6 to be realistic exactly, but I'm worried that unnecessary, over-the-top features like this will result in the same kind of emotional whiplash that Far Cry 5 suffered from. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Next, it appears from the gameplay that's been released that headshots are no longer a one-shot kill with every weapon on every enemy. Some enemies seem softer and go down after 3 to 4 shots like in traditional Far Cry entries, while some seem spongier and look like they absorb a lot more damage before dying. Fortunately, the combat doesn't look as clunky or unsatisfying as it was in Far Cry New Dawn, but it looks like there are different tiers of enemies and weapons like there were in that game. It's hard to tell because none of the gameplay has had the HUD turned on, but this is something I'm wary of going into Far Cry 6. I hope once we get our hands on the game, the gunplay feels as crisp and satisfying as it did in Far Cry 3 and 4. While we already knew Far Cry 6 would have third-person cutscenes, we've finally been able to watch a few examples of these, and I'm not sure how I feel about them.
Remember, Dani, Castillo has kept you an orphan. Why do you want to run?
I watched Castillo order a whole boat of our people shot to death. Get as far away as you can from that psychopath. All of you.
My original position on this topic hasn't changed. First person would be more immersive, which is better for the game. But I don't know exactly how much these cutscenes will detract from the story. Hopefully, not much. Additionally, it appears that we go into third person when entering guerrilla camps, more on those later, and when using our Supremo backpack abilities. Sure, I guess it looks cool to watch this from this perspective, but as with the cutscenes, I still think it would overall be better to maintain the immersion as much as possible. Something else that's not clear at all is how perks work in this game. Multiple sources and YouTube videos sponsored by Ubisoft have noted that the gear you wear changes your stats, such as how much damage you can take or how much headshot damage you do. What isn't clear is whether this RPG-like system of matching your visual style choices to your stats is completely replacing the perk points / skill point system that Far Cry has had since Far Cry 3, or whether it's simply an addition on top of the system you already had to upgrade your character and improve your abilities. I would certainly prefer if this new system were just an addition and not a replacement, and that follows my general rule about keeping RPG elements as far away from Far Cry games as possible. Far Cry is a narrative-driven first-person shooter, not a role-playing game. It should stay that way. Lastly, some of the gameplay we've seen, especially in the trailers, has been visually unimpressive to say the least. This point is last on my list because I don't think graphics will ever ruin my experience of a game if it's otherwise designed well, and there were also some issues with the live stream compressing the quality of the footage, as well as the fact that much of this video was probably captured in a very early build and prepared for marketing back when the release date was still intended for February. Overall, I'm not too worried about the graphics of Far Cry 6, and the nation of Yara still looks absolutely stunning in some shots, but I do hope they improve some of the lighting effects and character models before the game's full release. Okay, I'm done criticizing. Remember, I'm only harsh on this game because I want it to be the best it can be. That being said, there's so much to be excited about for Far Cry 6, so let's get into some of the things I'm looking forward to the most. First, the story. Despite my issues with third person and my concern about tonal inconsistency, I really like the direction they're taking with Far Cry 6. Navid Khavari, the narrative director for the game, was also the narrative director for the Whitetail Mountains region in Far Cry 5 and the Shangri-La missions in Far Cry 4. If you remember those, you'll know that Khavari has a talent for telling stories about dark, twisted evils within gorgeous, almost utopian settings. That seems to be exactly what Far Cry 6 is going for, and I'm really looking forward to a Far Cry story that focuses on the protagonist side as much as it focuses on the personality of the villain. I also think the guerrilla camp idea is really promising. These areas are like home bases for the Libertad movement, and are separate from the outposts and checkpoints you can liberate. Here, you can interact with other guerrillas, buy and craft weapons, play mini-games like dominoes, and even test your weapons on the firing range, which is one thing I specifically suggested in my video on how weapons should work in Far Cry 6. I'm not saying Ubisoft got the idea from me, but I'm not saying they didn't either. Anyway, I look forward to exploring these places, and I think they have a ton of potential to add fun mechanics to the game. Speaking of outposts and checkpoints, the few glimpses we've seen of them look very well designed. The outposts, which are now called F&D bases, look large and difficult, which is exactly how they should be. The checkpoints were described by lead gameplay designer David Grivel as bite-sized outposts. I like that there are a variety of enemy targets to choose between, and it sounds like there will be a large number of them as well, both of which are things I recommended in my Far Cry 6 Outposts video. Again, these look really promising. Now, let's talk about the weapons of Far Cry 6. With the new gameplay and trailers, we've already gotten to see a wide variety of these, and it's been reported that there are 49 total distinct weapons in the game, the most a Far Cry game has ever had. Many of these are older guns left over from the previous civil war in Yara, while some are makeshift inventions of guerrilla engineer Juan Cortez, just like I predicted and recommended in my Far Cry 6 weapons video. Additionally, a new feature that's underwhelming on its face, but that I'm actually very excited for, is the ability to holster your weapons. When you do this, enemies will not immediately attack you on sight, and instead will wait until you provoke them or pull your weapon in front of them. This feature adds a whole new element of strategy to stealth and reconnaissance, and according to Juan Cortez himself in the gameplay trailer, it enables the possibility for new side missions involving bribery, sabotage, interception, and smuggling, some of which I discussed in my video on side missions in Far Cry 6. This is a whole range of gameplay that's never been explored in a Far Cry game before, and it's exactly the right way to push the boundaries of the Far Cry formula without compromising the metaphorical DNA this series has. Lastly, the element of Far Cry 6 that I'm far and away most excited for is the world of Yara. It's certainly the largest, probably the most varied, and quite possibly the densest Far Cry world to date. The landscapes look absolutely amazing, from the mountains to the beaches, and I look forward to navigating the open ocean between islands. But the part that is most obviously exciting is the capital city, Esperanza. We now have a better look at the city from numerous angles both within and outside of it, and the sheer size and verticality are surprising even to my high standards of map design. We even have a few glimpses from below the city and secret guerrilla smuggling tunnels. Despite all that, the city is far from the only place to explore. It looks like there will be treasure hunts all over the map, both in remote jungles and semi-urban villages. I have a full-length discussion video coming about my thoughts on the world, vehicles, and travel of Far Cry 6, but Yara's world and the way it naturally encourages exploration are already exceeding my expectations. To keep this a reasonable length, I'm going to stop there, but let's just say there's a lot to look forward to in Far Cry 6. As always, I'll include the links to my sources in the description, and if you haven't already, I definitely suggest watching the gameplay and story trailers for yourself. Be sure to subscribe for further in-depth breakdowns of the design and mechanics in Far Cry 6, and until then, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
It's fun.